Hi, my name is John Pierce. Today we're doing a reading response for my Foundations in Teaching course for my single subject credential program. So, our reading response is directly from Reaching and Teaching Students in Poverty by Paul C. Gorski, Strategies for Erasing the Opportunity Gap. The book focuses mainly on how we as educators should identify different issues going on when teaching students in poverty and teaching in poverty stricken communities, and how we can improve our students' lives and our teaching in relation to that. This reading response is directly related to Chapter 7. Um, we go over different principles of Gorski's 12 principles for teaching equitable literacy. But the main ones covered in this chapter include number 2, a right to equitable education. Number 6, we cannot understand the relationship between poverty and education without understanding the barriers people of poverty experience in and out of schools. Number 7, test scores are inadequate measures of equity. Number 8, educational outcome disparities are the result of inequities or unjust distribution of access and opportunity. So all of these pretty much go hand in hand, but it's important to see how they all correlate with each other, especially in the real world. There's no path to equity. That does not include direct confrontation with inequity. Okay? So I think this is actually a pretty strong quote by Gorski here, that we as educators need to understand inequity and what our students are facing in order to really understand what we need to do to scaffold them in the ways where they can learn and use their strengths to be ahead and on the same level as students who may have more opportunities than they do. Dealing with inequity in the great equalizer. The great equalizer here being, well, the education system as a whole. So, how do we deal with that? Is it an equalizer because it puts everybody on the same level as each other? Well, sorry to say it, but most times not the case. Understanding the relationship between performance and poverty as a chain of conditions. That's how we deal with inequity, or at least the first step, right? So, understanding what our students may be facing and some of the deficits that they might be having to endure that more affluent communities who aren't in poverty wouldn't have to worry about it or already have the access to. Okay. So, these can include preschool, well funded schools, adequately resourced schools, shadow education, meaning tutoring and extra services to kind of help them prepare for things that other students may not have access to in a poverty-stricken community. School support services, affirming school environments, high academic expectations, well-paid certified and experienced teachers, student-centered higher order curricula and pedagogies, opportunity for family involvement, and instructional technologies. Students in poverty have a lot more issues going on at home or in their own lives that more affluent students may not have to worry about as much. So let's take shadow education, for example, or even preschools. These things cost money. Now, in a poverty stricken community where maybe a single parent household is working two jobs, not having a lot of time to spend with their children just to put food on the table and to pay rent at the end of the month, they're not going to have a lot of extra resources and a lot of extra money to pay for these. And this kind of goes back to principle number 7, right? So with SAT scores and things like that, more affluent students are going to have more access to SAT preps and things like that. This doesn't mean the students are any less smarter, just that some may have more access to these prep opportunities that prepare them for the test, where students in poverty may not. And that's just one example. There are many examples of um, similar factors. Um, but without going too in depth on every single one, I'm just going to go into the real world example of kind of how this all comes into play. As an educator, I implore you to use websites such as EdData and obviously just learning directly from your students what the issues are in the community you're teaching in. I chose to talk about Chino Hills High School and Chino High School, all part of Chino Unified School District, but they have vastly different numbers of students going on to college, and students who graduate. Okay, so in the same district, but very different areas and different student demographics, which we need to, as educators, identify in order to understand our students and our students' needs. So, with data collected from EdData, I'm able to see that there may be a correlation between the poverty and income levels based on student lunches, as needed, right? And we can also see that the school that may be more affluent also has many more educational options than the less affluent school, right? So this all comes back into play. Especially if you go onto Google Maps, you can just see all that shadow education, more tutoring centers available just in the more higher income area around the more better performing high school. Like I said, it doesn't mean the students are any less smart. It just means that more opportunities are provided, and the more affluent community may have um, more resources available to them that the other school doesn't. So how do we deal with this as educators? Put the students first. Start learning these things. Without being able to identify those needs, there's nothing we can do about it. Don't reproduce the same disadvantages in your own classroom. Be the change you need, that your students need and you want to see. Be a resource to them. Knowing that they may not have the same opportunities or resources that a more affluent community does, find ways to help them or to at least substitute that, among many others. Thanks a lot, guys.